Welcome to the 19th week of the year. I'm Marty. I'd like to thank you for joining in with me here at Warehouse and Operations as a Career. We have several new subscribers that's joined us recently, and I'd like to thank them for clicking that little subscribe button and encourage you to share your thoughts and suggestions on topics with us by joining our Facebook and Twitter feeds, where we can be found by using that little @ sign, WHSEANDOPS, or emailing host at warehouseandoperationsasacareer.com. I'll see that we answer or get the answers to each of your questions and try and share as many as we can here on the show. Hey, that's what WAOC is all about. Us learning from each other, breaking into the operations arena, achieving success within our jobs, and if our goals are to turn that job into a career, we'll try and offer up some experiences and thoughts on planning to accomplish just that. 2 weeks ago we talked about a couple of things I felt were important to us. Things I thought we needed to have a little knowledge on to get noticed by our management teams and help ourselves in the warehouse. One of those things were SDS Books, or Safety Data Sheet Stations. We received a few questions about them, so I thought maybe we should talk a little more about what they are and why we need to know where they're kept and why that's even important to us. We'll be checking in with our WAOC Safety guy, Joe, here in a bit and get the thoughts from a professional. I'm certain we'll all think a little differently after having them explained to us today. I feel they can possibly save us from being permanently disabled in some way or chemically burned or maybe even worse. Secondly, it's probably one of those first questions a compliance or third-party auditor may ask us as an employee, and certainly, and not lastly, it could very well be the law in certain industries. I think every employee needs to know how to find that information and how to read them really quickly, so we'll know how to treat a spill or contamination should our coworkers or ourselves even come in contact with a chemical that we're not familiar with. We all know it's important to keep even household chemicals put away at home to protect our children, and how we should never mix different ingredients, chemicals, detergents, solvent, or disinfectants at home to clean our bathrooms and kitchens. When we have an emergency at home and call an emergency line, the first thing that they're going to reach for is the safety data sheet for the chemical's name that we're calling about. I have a friend that's pulled up the sheets on every chemical in his home and reviews them with his family like twice a year. He also changes the batteries in the smoke alarms, teaches his children to be aware that cords are snugly inserted into electrical outlets at all times and how extension cords have no use in the home. Yep, he's a safety consultant and has seen the devastating results complacency and not being aware or prepared can really cause. I'm always kidding him about his obsession with the subject, but I have to agree his family and children are much safer with that knowledge than I am, or most of us probably are. I'd also had a question about forklifts this week, and it's came up several times, so I wanted to talk about it for just a minute. I was asked by an experienced set-down or counterbalance lift driver if it was going to be hard for him to learn to drive a stand-up reach lift. As we like to say here at WAOC, experience in our fields is really the only teacher, that there's just really no shortcuts. None of us are born with a powered industrial equipment gene in us. I don't feel operating any type of warehouse equipment is really difficult, but we have to be taught how it works. I think its operation starts with understanding, how dangerous they can be, and that safety is really the first component. If we've been taught all the safety procedures and all the processes and we act responsibly at all times when using or are around equipment, that once we're shown the controls and equipment's uses and an instructor oversees our certification to operate it, we'll have the knowledge and the tools to be successful at it. This gentleman's been operating the set-down lift for 4 years and hasn't had any accidents or incidences. I expressed to him that I felt the learning curve shouldn't be anything to stress over or be really anxious about. Well, once again, I got to rambling on a bit. Joe, why didn't you let me keep that babbling going on, bub?
Well, it's all needed information, sir. We got to hear it sometime or another.
Well, that's true, and I want to thank you for your time again. How have you been? I heard you was up in Illinois 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yes, sir. Getting around to the issues is kind of a needed thing sometimes. And I always think that a fresh set of eyes, can help see things that everyday eyes can't, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense, and it's an ongoing process. So, Joe, tell us about SDS and maybe correct me if I'm overemphasizing it a bit.
All right, it's time for me to go into my rant. Not too long ago, we underwent a change from MSDS to SDS. It was mainly a change in name. For the most part, everything stayed in place. One of the things that I always like to ask people, whatever warehouse that I'm working at, is always like asking the actual workers themselves where the most dangerous stuff in the building is at. Everything that comes into a warehouse is received through the dock. So if those guys don't know what they're handling, that would be a good time for them to realize and find out. Usually questions like that kind of, initiate a thought process in several employees that makes them kind of go out and discover and learn about these things. There's two different sections inside of the SDS sheet that I always like to point out that I typically stress to people, and that's going to be Section 4 and Section 8. Section 4 is going to be the first aid section. That's going to be the part that tells you rinse your eyes with water, or don't make yourself throw up, or make yourself throw up, or what kind of treatment you actually need, if you need to call a poison control center or just 911. Section 8, the next most important section, I would say, is going to deal with PPE. And it's going to be the requirements of what you need to have covered or wrapped or whatever the case may be for you to handle that product.
I just recently, I've started asking the same kind of questions out and about in my travels. What kind of response are you getting when you ask about Section 4 or Section 8? Are you finding that most supervisors have already covered that with employees, or is this kind of new news to employees?
Well, I could tell for some employees it's old hat. This is stuff that's, this is the stuff our meetings are made of. Everybody everywhere who operates some kind of equipment or operates on some kind of a team inside of a warehouse has all of these safety meetings. So you could tell who's just, going through the numbers or what. I actually had a supervisor repeat the Section 4 and Section 8 thing to me. The only problem with that was, if you have to go to a book, Marty, and refer to Section 4, then you could probably kiss your butt goodbye right then and there. Right when you get, kryptonite on you is not when Superman has to go and try to find the antidote for it. You got to kind of plan ahead, know what the dangers are, know what the hazards could be. And if you know you're bringing a whole lot of ether into your building, then you should probably, have an alternate emergency plan that kind of is based on that.
Yeah, those are very good points. So I guess you wouldn't do it with every chemical. Probably the most moved or the largest shipping quantity or receiving quantity. So you're thinking, or you're stating that it's probably a good idea that for us to cover that at our startup meetings or go over the most moved product, so we know how to react.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great idea. The reason I say that is because we always want to be aware of the stuff that's going to impact us. If we're bringing in, a ton of sand throughout the building, of course, we're going to have, spill plans for the sand. But I concern myself with that once a week shipment that could possibly endanger myself or my team if we spill it, or if it leaks, or, whatever the case may be. Some people work with stuff that's reactive to water, so we just have to make sure that our employees are aware of the stuff that's physically around them at all times and the precautions that they need to take. I would always just kind of ramp that up to the stuff that would have the most impact to the workers there, the workforce itself.
Oh, that's a really good point right there. We could probably really get some bonus points with our management or our management team by knowing what we shouldn't put water on, and maybe pointing out what we shouldn't stock above something else, those kind of things. We could really get noticed by having that education ourselves, couldn't we?
Oh, absolutely. And, in whatever industry we're in, there's always going to be that segregation of products and chemicals because of their volatileness or their hazard type or flammability or whatever the case may be. Every warehouse is unique. Every work situation could be a little bit different, but we all have very common things that link them all together.
I'm kind of old school myself, Joe. I see, SDS stations, and they're usually have like caution banners around them, and they're red and they're very bright. I've started noticing like signs, where you call a 1-800 number. Is that taking the place, or is it just another tool that companies are using? Or is that taking the place of the old hard copy book to where we actually make a phone call to find out about Section 4, Section 8?
All those services kind of cater to the businesses specifically that they were set up for. I actually think they're a pretty great idea. I don't think we'll ever get rid of the hard copy book. A lot of our old school guys are so very familiar with. It does serve its purpose. But you bring up a good point, is we're so used to seeing the SDS book thumbing through pages or, the SDS station mounted up to the wall. A couple of customers that we service also have these signs up on the wall, and it is an 800 number, and they have very good service too. They are very aware of Section 4 and Section 8 of every chemical in that building. The best part about it is it's third party. So, they're not necessarily in cahoots with your employer or whatever. You're going to get the factual information and the truth about whatever chemicals are there.
Yeah, and I guess they would probably be more up to date because they're going to have every chemical registered with our company to where, if a merchandiser or the safety guy or the warehouse guy, forgets to put a page in our book or just hasn't updated it, real recent, I guess maybe the phone line, they would already have all that information, wouldn't they?
Oh, absolutely. They're very well versed at what they do. And that information is very key, especially when we deal with a workplace that has a lot of substitutions for orders or things of that nature where it might not exactly be alcohol, but it's exactly like alcohol.
Yeah, I think our SDS or even knowing about our chemicals is just one thing that we can self-educate ourselves on and, kind of stay ahead of the game. I mean, it's for our own protection, really. Joe, thanks for all those thoughts.
Oh, no problem, Marty. We all have to kind of get on the same page with the SDS. As long as we function as a team and put this information out, every workplace should be covered.
Agreed. So, Joe, when I started operating equipment, it was kind of learn as you go. Of course, I was told to be careful. There wasn't really any kind of structured safety training, and certainly nothing like today's 29 CFR 1910.178 training. I wish there had been. We'd all been much better operators. But there's very few classes available that really teaches us to use the equipment out there. I'm not talking about a certification class. As we've discussed here several times, an employer should give us that for free. How do you feel, or what advice do you have for us first-time employees that's learning to operate equipment? And as a supervisor, how do you think we should train a new associate on it?
Well, Marty, for our supervisors doing the training, the answer should be very carefully. When it comes to teaching and showing people, we need to be real careful that we're not cutting corners, that we're not teaching the wrong thing, that we're showing our procedures and steps correctly from the beginning. An introduction to something is very potent. If we're teaching something that is of interest to an employee and we teach them a cutting corner method or something kind of half-stepped, we could probably expect this guy to return the favor and multiply that times 10 with the people he teaches and shows and cuts those corners with, albeit he doesn't know he's cutting a corner.
That's true. And luckily, in my travels, I don't see a lot of what I would say mistraining. The thing that concerns me is how much time we're spending with that guy, on the first couple of days that he's on a jack. I just feel like that he should really be, I don't know, not babysit, but he should really be watched over and somebody be with him. Maybe if it's order selecting or something like that, somebody is right there beside him to help him get out of a bind.
Oh, and that's true, Marty. Me, you, all of us, we all learned how to operate our very first piece of equipment, not necessarily being licensed to do so, all at the cost of a senior employee teaching us, I think would be fair to say. And it's kind of, we owe that same service to the new workers that are coming in to kind of teach them how we were taught and what they need to be doing.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't taught as I teach today. What do you think one of the biggest thing that we should watch when training somebody on, say, an electric pallet jack? What do you think's the one thing we really need to pay attention to, make sure that they understand?
Control. What I see a lot of is, for some reason, kids these days think everything is a race. Sometimes what it is just maintaining control over your equipment. I can only liken this to, back in the cowboy days when people would get on their horses. You have males and females that can operate this equipment, so it's definitely about control. It's not about strength.
I couldn't agree more. As a matter of fact, I was going to say forward and backwards. Control is a perfect word for it. Well, Joe, I really enjoyed the visit today, and as usual, I learned a whole lot from you. Thanks for your time, and as always, thanks for sharing your knowledge with us here at WAOC, sir.
No problem. Always a pleasure to be here. We might have our website coming up to full blast here pretty soon for the training center that I'm helping work out. We hope you guys will stop by and check that out.
We would love to. And a big thank you to all of our listeners out there. We appreciate your time. Keep those questions and suggestions coming in. That's really why we keep showing up here each week. Let's all go in tomorrow and identify our SDS stations. Maybe bring them up at our startup meeting. It'd be nice to help a peer out by sharing its importance with them.